I listened to your lecture on the sideline of CAIS. You quote a famous scientist talking about the beauty of being a scientist, to be able to see the world strange and rich. That is the best reward. Tell me, what is the moment for you?
That's during my research, I was working with, I tried to work to isolate single particles, single atoms, and single particle of light, which are called photons, and to observe the strangeness of their behavior, which is quite different from what you have in the macroscopic world. You had to put them in an enclosure, what we call a cavity, to protect them from all the distraction of the environment. And one day we were able to do that and to observe the strange behavior of a single atom with a single photon. And this is at the heart of the interaction between light with matter. At the most elementary level, you need to be able to have a single particle of matter, one atom, interacting with a single particle of light, a photon. And the day we were able to do that and to observe some things that we had predicted but not seen was one of these days when you have this feeling to be the first one to observe something. And I think something which is also important is to be the first one. It seemed to be gratuitous. It does not seem to have any value in terms of money or in terms of recognition. It's like an alpinist who goes at the summit of a mountain to see the world under a different angle. And that's the kind of feeling which was conveyed, I think, in the sentence that I gave in the talk.
When did you know that you will be able to measure it? Because atom was rather a very abstract concept, and yet you and your co-workers, for the very first time, be able to do it, to be able to let human beings know exactly what it is and how to measure it.
Now, at the time when I started my research, the atom was not an abstract concept. It was clear that the atom existed. They had been seen under different circumstances. For example, in the particle accelerators, you smash atoms one against the other. But this is a very brutal and destructive way to look at them. What we were able to do, not only our group, but many other scientists in the world, was to use the very sensitive tools that we have, the lasers, to manipulate and observe them without destroying them. So it's a different way to access to atoms. It was not the first time they were seen. So the tools which were used in our experiment are lasers, the atomic beams, the fact that we can produce atoms on beams in the vacuum, cryogenics, to be able to go at very low temperatures to avoid the thermal photons which will disturb the system. So all these technologies added up and were used together to be able to achieve this task. And this technology came also very often from quantum physics. For example, the laser was an offspring of basic quantum physics. So what we are experiencing is a kind of virtuous loop. You start with the quantum concepts, which allows you to build machines like lasers, and then the lasers can be used to deepen your knowledge about the quantum system.
The quantum computing chips being produced recently by China, it is claimed to be 1,000 times faster than NVIDIA's GPU. Of course, there's a lot of hype also, when it comes to competition among industries and also among scientists. But what do you make of this as another step?
I don't know which marketable product it will lead to, but I suspect that you will have very fast applications to have quantum probes, very sensitive to measure small electric and magnetic fields at a microscopic level, to build probes which will be useful for research in biology, for instance, to understand what happens at the level of cells. You already have this kind of thing. You will have probes which will be able to measure gravitational fields with a very high precision, which will be useful for geodesic studies, maybe to predict earthquake or volcano eruptions, which is something which is on the verge of happening. You have tremendous progress in the precision of clocks, atomic clocks, optical clocks, which count the frequencies of optical light, and which have reached unbelievable precision, and which are tools which will be useful for research and also for practical applications.
How are you imagining yourself taking advantage of quantum computing once it becomes the main stage in your research? I mean, this is kind of back and forth in a way.
I don't know. I think in our kind of research, one goal would be to be able to synthesize new materials which have properties which could be useful. For example, if you can find a superconductor working at room temperature, a new phase of matter which will be able to do that. And there are hopes that quantum simulation, the fact that you can put atoms at a well-defined position and study their behavior at a large scale, could help you to synthesize and to have ways to synthesize these kind of new materials. You can think also of quantum simulation to discover new drugs, new complex molecules. And in this direction, I see that there might be a combination of quantum simulation and artificial intelligence working together to understand better how matter can become rich of information, how what we call entanglement can be used to find new forms of matter. So this is what the kind of physics which is going forward in my field. But there are many other domains which are also very interesting.
The other thing related to science, of course, is the competition and cooperation.
Yeah.
We are in a very different stage of our modern history. So how do you see the relationship between competition and cooperation?
Competition should be moderated by cooperation. It's very important to understand that in the time when science was successful, it's because people from different countries were able to cooperate. Even when, I'm talking about the history of Europe, even when European countries were at war, the scientists across the boundaries were working together. Galileo was in touch with Descartes in France. Newton collaborated also with other people. In the 19th and 20th century, even when France and Germany were at war, Einstein had good friends in France and so on. This is very important because science cannot progress without this kind of collaboration between countries. And I think it's very important now that you have geopolitical tensions which raise barriers between China and the West. I think it's very bad. I understand it's very positive to emphasize the progress of China, and that you can be proud in China of the great progress which has been made in science during the last 30 years, but you have also to understand that this progress is linked to the kind of collaboration and cooperation you have between the West and the East, and I see as a big danger the fact that this collaboration is put in jeopardy by the present situation, the present geopolitical situation.
What do you think can be done by you and your counterparts here in China, in Europe, in North America, wherever they are, to make sure that cooperation and competition are coexisting?
I think you should develop the programs which help young people to travel. For example, once you have gotten your PhD in one country, to be able to go for a postdoc in another country, with an agreement that once you have finished and gotten expertise in a new field as a postdoc, that you'll be able to come back to your original country and to make your country benefit from what you learned abroad. I think it's important in so-called underdeveloped or developing countries to have this kind of programs, because it will help them to develop a scientific basis, a scientific environment. I think it has been for a long time the case in China, that a lot of scientists in China got their expertise by going to work in the United States, in England, or other countries in Europe. Now you have reached a stage where you can do it by yourself, but still I think you need on both sides to be able to travel and to do these kind of things. I think young scientists have a problem all over the world now. It's difficult to get the kind of money required to do complex experiments. And to do that, I think all kind of program which would open grants for young people to be able to settle in one place in the world for 5, 6, 7 years to develop an ambitious program then going elsewhere to finish, it would be nice, and it would be very important this to be developed across boundaries, and that's my dream.
That would take networks of educational institutions, supporting financial policies coming from their own governments and governments elsewhere as well.
Yes, and maybe some private in the West, some private philanthropic money and money coming from other sources and government.
Efficient in information flow.
Yes, and making sure that information can flow freely, and there's a clear separation between open research and research which has strategic goals for which you can understand some level of protection is required. But I think this strategic goals is an excuse to close research in a way which I think is not reasonable.
You have been, in your earlier speech, very conscious about distinguishing a carbon-based brain and also silicon-based brain. And you are asking the important question about consciousness as AI further develops. Tell me more why this is important.
If you assume that AI can reach consciousness, then how do you deal with AI? Are you able to just disconnect a system which claims that he has consciousness and wants to achieve some goals for its own happiness? This is a big issue, and I think it's an issue which is raised by the book that I mentioned at the end, this Clara and the Sun, which tells a very moving story about an AI machine which feels empathy for the people which it is supposed to serve, and then it is discarded as a kind of used vacuum cleaner, and then it raises an issue about that. There is another issue, which is if you leave AI to have superpowers, as some people claim, it would be a danger for it. Might have its own goals, which will conflict with the goals we can have as human beings, and this will be also a big issue. I don't believe it that. I think AI will remain a tool, but as you know, tools can be used for good or for bad applications.
Of course.
And it raises this issue that AI has to be used according to moral values that we have to share all over the world. If we don't do that, then AI will not be trusted.
If AI has been used rapidly to replace some of the earlier industries and people lose jobs and the competition become too fearful in the modern society. But one could also argue, haven't we seen the history of industrialization over the past decades? And it just happened like that. Why is this time should be different? And can it be different at all?
I am not sure it's different. It happened in the past, and it has led to revolutions. For example, in the 19th century in Europe, the development of mechanization in the silk industry, in the fabric industry, had led to revolutions, revolts, and all over the 19th century, all over Europe, the fact that old industries disappear and people feel insecure and cannot live anymore. It has happened, and it might happen with AI again. And we have to find ways, and I think China is not immune from that. It might happen.
Nobody is.
I think one solution is education. The goal of education should not be only to learn one expertise. The goal of education should be to raise children and young people who are flexible enough to adapt to the changes in technologies. So they have to be able to adapt to AI now, and in the future maybe to other developments, and what make people feel insecure if they have an education which is too rigid, which does not give them this possibility.
You have been very devoted to the education of the younger generation. What have you found out with your tours and speeches about what people's understanding of AI is?
First of all, I did not give talks about AI. I gave talk about quantum information, quantum science, and I was always struck by
I see, that was a Nobel Laureate discussion with Jeffrey.
Yes, I had a discussion. It was the first time I discussed about that.
Oh, you did?
But in general, when I talk about quantum science and science in general, I am struck by the enthusiasm of children and the curiosity and all the questions they ask. and they ask me questions I cannot really answer. They say, in which field do you think I should go? What should I do if I want to become a scientist? And I tell them, you have to find the topic for which you have a passion, and you have to try to feel whether this domain is going to evolve very quickly due to new technologies. And I think it's the case now with AI. I think if you are interested in learning something about the universe or about health or about your brain, getting some expertise in AI will certainly help you. At my time, as an experimentalist, I was helped by the development of lasers. It was a time when I had the gut feeling that laser would become very important in science, and it happened.
You are here with the CAAIS, and you see the enthusiasm in the crowds, young people. They are either majoring in artificial intelligence or relative subjects. Your thoughts on where they are, and any suggestion as well?
Again, I think suggestion is if they are intrigued by AI, want to understand how it works, they have to choose one subtopic, one topic of interest. For example, use AI, connect AI to the brain to help handicapped people to acquire abilities machine interaction between AI and robots is also a very important topic. If you want AI to acquire feeling of the environment, it has to be coupled to robots. And if you are more inclined towards basic science, then to think about ways to use AI to make discoveries in chemistry, in physics, or in biology. There are certainly a lot of things to do in these directions.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor, for your input and insights.
Thank you.